So the other day I'm straightening up stuff and I see a copy of a record of an album on CD. And I thought, wait a minute, I have that over here on vinyl. So I walked over here to check, and sure enough, I have a copy on CD and on vinyl. And I want to talk to you just a few minutes about this record and about this guy, because I know a lot of people look at this record and they're like, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Let's see who that guy is. I'm talking about David Lindley and the album El Rayo-Ex. That was the band he started after his other career that he was working with Jackson Browne. And when he left Jackson Browne, he started El Rayo-Ex. And in David's words, El Rayo-Ex was a party band, but we'll get to that in a second. David Lindley, who is that dude? And what about this record? Let me put it to you this way. The Washington Post said, this record is like being in a haunted house and rounding the corner and seeing a 6-foot tall Goofy. So I was put this on the other day and was listening to it when I realized I had 2 copies in the store. It's a great summer party album. And that's like what Lindley said, that this was a party record, but with radioactive lyrics. And again, I'm getting sidetracked there, but we'll get to that in a minute. But who is David Lindley? Who is this dude? Look at him. Looks like a total freak. I believe it was Acoustic Guitar Magazine. Is that right? I don't recall because I don't read it. But some people are multi-instrumentalists, but I believe it was Acoustic Guitar Player or Acoustic Guitar Magazine called David Lindley a maxi-instrumentalist. And in fact, Ry Cooder, who was a buddy of David Lindley, said David picks up instruments and eats them. What he meant by that is it's not just enough to know something, but David Lindley would totally immerse himself and, well, like Ry said, would eat an instrument. It wouldn't stop. You know, he just had to get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. But Lindley, let's talk. Who is this dude, David Lindley? He's a super freak, dressed like a super freak. Sadly, he passed away a handful of years ago. But we could say, I know it's a term that people kind of overuse. He was a musician's musician. He was one of the most sought after sidemen and slide guitarists out there in popular music. He was, basically a genius. You give him any instrument and let him loose and he would master it in no time. He could do almost anything. His dad his uncle was a concert pianist. And David had said when he was a young kid, he used to crawl under the piano and put his head at the bottom of the soundboard and sit on the floor with his head up against the piano so that sound would travel through him. And he said that's what really made him develop his love for music. And he became fascinated through seeing the instruments with his uncle and whatnot, with stringed instruments. And he actually wanted to become a classical Turkish maestro, but his saz teacher told him, Lindley, stick with that rock and roll, stick playing rock and roll with a guitar, and you'll get somewhere. You'll never make it as a Turkish classical guitarist or saz player or whatever you want to call it, a stringed instrumentalist. But anyway, that's a little bit about David and how he got into it. Like I said, Lindley was great. He's a fantastic slide guitar player. Well, any stringed instruments, and even other maestros of string instruments look to Lindley like he is the guy. Real quick, I'll just give you a quick breakdown about kind of how Lindley came into being and how we got to this. Back in the 60s, he had another band, I believe it was called Kaleidoscope. And I believe it was in 67, he had released an album called Side Trips, if I remember correctly. And this was one of the first records, remember, this is hippie psychedelic time, that combined rock music with kind of the Middle Eastern sound and whatever. And one of the biggest fans, well, I should say first, the record didn't really do anything here in the United States. But Lindley did have a fan who was a little more famous on the other side of the pond who loved this record and was ranting on and on about Lindley and this record. And it was none other than Jimmy Page. And think about that. This was 67. when Lindley had done that record, and it blew Jimmy Page's mind. Of course, many years later, Kashmir, Led Zeppelin bringing in that Middle Eastern sound. I'm just saying, did Lindley influence that? I don't know. But Lindley really made his name with Jackson Browne. He was a sideman of Jackson Browne for a long time, all through Jackson's classic period. The famous guitar solo on Running on Empty, that's David Lindley playing the slide. Anyway, he was a huge guy. Actually, I should mention his first, aside from his session work, or let me rephrase that. His first session work, he played on Leonard Cohen's debut album. He's played with Iggy Pop. He's played with Linda Ronstadt. He's played with Dolly Parton. He's played with Rayo-Ex. He's played with Jackson Browne. Like I said, he's a hugely sought after sideman. Why? Because he's a master at everything. I have to tell you, or at all string instruments, I have to say. And I have to tell you a funny thing, that when someone had asked David Lindley, hey, who do you really like and admire? He said, I like Dolly Parton's ears. You thought I was going to say something else. And he went on to say he loved working with Dolly Parton because she knew what she wanted and she wasn't afraid to say it. That she was one of these people who could say, that banjo sounds like it's too bluegrass. We need something a little more rougher, or pick up that and play it like an old man lost in the hills. That she was very distinct about how she would describe music. And Lindley loved that because he loved to get down to the nitty gritty and know exactly how to play for the different people that he was playing with or what they wanted from him. But anyway, he was Lindley, guitar genius, slide guitar hero. If you see this album, if you come in the store, you will see El Rayo-Ex, and you will see it on vinyl, and you will see it on CD. My neighbor, Doug Pinnick, I used to live next to Doug Pinnick, who went on to start King's X. I don't know if you've ever heard that band. I remember seeing this album in Doug's house all the time, and he used to talk about this album. And for the longest time, I never listened to it. But I never knew that was David Lindley playing on like Jackson Browne records, as well as others. So I'm just hipping you. So next time, or if you happen to go into a record store, or you're in this store, next time you're in a record store, or you're talking or looking in a magazine, and you see David Lindley, El Rayo-Ex, who is that dude? Now you know a little bit more about David Lindley, who he is, and what he is, and what this record is. El Rayo-Ex's great party album. How did we get to this? I'll tell you real quick in a nutshell. I mentioned that David had done, I believe it was Kaleidoscope who had done the album that Page liked. He had actually gone to England after that band Kaleidoscope didn't work, to work with Terry Reid, the vocalist Terry Reid. And if I'm not mistaken, Led Zeppelin had looked at Terry Reid and wanted Terry Reid to play with them. But anyway, check out Terry Reid if you don't know Terry Reid. Great guitar player and a great singer. But Lindley had gone to the UK to work with them. He didn't work out, and he came back to the US and he worked with Jackson Browne for a good 10 years or so. And in 1980, he left Jackson Browne and started El Rayo-Ex. Now, I think it's a great party album. One of the big hits, or one of the big songs off of here, was She Took Off My Romeos. Great tune. This is just a fun album. There's a great version of Bye Bye Love on here. Lindley actually had somewhat of a hit on FM radio with Mercury Blues, which is on here, and Quarter of a Man. These are all on side ones. But Quarter of a Man, great song. I really enjoy that song. But Lindley, I mentioned to you earlier, he said it was a party album, a party band with radioactive lyrics. And he said actually the music that he had done with El Rayo-Ex, they did, I think, 2 albums, was basically music made for solos, for parties, and for solos. And he said why? Because it was a 2-part, 3-part singing and harmony thing set up to take solos in. And he said basically when you listen to this, the kind of music he was doing was country music, but not that kind of country music, like real music where it gets its roots from. And he compared it to the Grateful Dead. He said, especially in the 70s there, late 60s and 70s and whatever, the Grateful Dead were doing the same thing, but they were a little more bluegrass. but by fusing it with their weird views and whatnot, it became its own thing. Same thing here. You get El Rayo-Ex Party Band. Next time you see this blue album with the orange lettering, black and orange lettering, with this weirdly dressed man on the front, give it a chance. Give it a listen. It's summertime, so it's a great soundtrack for that. David Lindley, only one of the greatest string musicians, guitarists ever. Fantastic slide player. Check it out. David Lindley, El Rayo-Ex. You'll be glad you did.